Welcome to the Full Nielsen. Today I'm going to be doing a comparison of the Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0 competitor metal, or metal competitor. I don't know the exact way you want to phrase that, quite a mouthful. And over here, the Canik rival SFX steel frame. Now, I just got back from the range with these two guns. It was my first trip out with the Canik. I've been out several times with the Smith & Wesson. The Smith & Wesson just got back from the factory because I had some issues with it, or what I perceive as quality issues with this. Some of them are just design issues with this that I'm not sure they're going to be able to do anything to rectify. And basically they shot the gun and sent it back with a laundry list of things saying that they had worked on a bunch of things. And I can tell you from handling the gun that they did not do any of the things, or nearly any of the things on the list. They said they fixed the trigger, which is ridiculously heavy and not great. Trigger is completely unchanged. Slide to frame fit, they didn't mention doing anything about. That was one of my biggest complaints, and I'll talk about how that translated into being a pretty substantial issue today and why it's a substantial issue. Because I know there's a lot of people out there that say it's normal for there to be a little bit of play between the frame and the slide, and you're not wrong. But there are some differences with this and why it's problematic with this that I haven't seen with any of the other probably 30 to 40 striker-fired handguns that I've owned. So they didn't do anything about that. And then the front strap coming loose on this, it feels as though they've replaced it. It's still loose. It's less loose than the one that was on there, but that's just going to be an inherent problem with the design of this gun, and I'll show you why that's the case here in a minute. But anyway, so comparison-wise, the short version, the Canik is twice the gun for virtually the same money. So for those of you who are like, which one should I get? Buy the Canik steel frame. It's a better gun. There's no comparison between them. It has a better trigger. It's softer shooting because of the steel frame. The fitment between the slide and frame is superior. And I'll show you when I take apart some of the things design-wise, some of the reasons why I think that's superior. The way the grip modules are installed and removed is superior. The way the mag well is held on and comes off is superior. The fit and finish of the firearm is superior. This is an amazing gun for the money. This is my first Canik. I bought both of these with my own money. I've shot lots of Smith & Wessons. I haven't owned any, but I've shot lots of them. I've reviewed lots of them on the channel. I have family members that own a lot of them. I have a lot of experience with M&Ps, and this is my first Canik, and I'm telling you, I am blown away with the performance of these Caniks. If somebody had come to me 10 years ago and said, hey, would you trade your Glock in for a Canik, or your Smith & Wessons in for a Canik, or anything like that, I would have been like, no way. And I think early on they had some growing pains, and they weren't necessarily known for the best quality control or the most reliability or any of that. And they are constantly improving, and they're constantly trying to give consumers what they want. The way I would describe these two guns is, this is as if Canik went to the drawing board and said, how can we take our Canik platform and make the best competition gun out of that platform possible? This gun, in my opinion, after using it and experiencing it, is as if Smith & Wesson went to the drawing board and said, how can we make a gun that will be easy to market, that will be very appealing from an aesthetics perspective, cosmetic perspective, and all that kind of stuff, but really won't do anything to offer anything above and beyond what a standard M&P offers. That's the way I see this gun versus this gun. This gun is mount your optic on it and off to the races. Whether you want to compete with it, however you want to use the gun, this gun is going to perform superb. This gun, if you want to use it as a competition gun, is going to need some work done to it, mainly as it pertains to the trigger. The other issue for me, because of the slide frame fit, and this may be I got a lemon or something, there are some accuracy issues with this gun that are a result of that slide frame fit, and I'll talk about why that's the case. Now, so why don't I go into that? I took these two guns to the range today, and when I zeroed them off a bench, sitting down, rested, and then I proceeded to shoot freehand, back and forth, rested, freehand, everything to get a feel for how they shoot accuracy-wise, how easy they are to shoot, how quickly I can shoot them. As far as speed and cadence of fire, I can shoot both of these guns at pretty much the same cadence and hit the target. As far as precision, when you slow it down and you're engaging longer range targets, no comparison. The Rival is much easier to shoot accurately, and I think that's primarily due to the trigger being a phenomenal trigger. This trigger is better than any aftermarket trigger I've ever used in any other competitor's striker-fired gun. I just got through with the Timney Alpha trigger for Glocks and the Timney competition trigger. I've reviewed both of those. This trigger is twice as good as those triggers, in my opinion. And I've had some people debate with me on that issue. I don't think they've used this gun with this trigger, or maybe they have and they just need to use them side by side. But using them, this trigger is twice as good as those triggers, and it's included with the gun. Those other triggers are $150, $100 to $150 upgrades, and they still don't compare to this trigger. So anyway, enough about that tangent. Now, as far as how the trigger is better on this, shooting cadence-wise, pretty equal. Shooting, slowing it down for precision, way better with this gun. Which one feels softer shooting? This feels like it's softer shooting. This feels like it cycles faster. That's just my perception. Probably not accurate. If you use a high-speed camera, it might not actually be the case, but that's how they feel when you're firing them. So anyway, that's kind of my impressions firing these two firearms. Now, accuracy-wise, resting off of a bench. This thing I could shoot one ragged hole at. I started out just to get my optic dialed in at 5 yards, and then I go out to 15 yards because usually what I find is the height over bore, I like to make an adjustment out at 15 yards, and usually once I get that dialed in at about 15 yards, it stays pretty accurate all the way out to 25 yards or so is the farthest I was shooting at this particular range. When I'm shooting outdoors, when it's a bit warmer, I'll be shooting farther than that. But what I don't want is the height over bore, basically where the sights come into alignment, to be so dramatic, and I've seen this, where you'll be making shots on the target, no problem, let's say on like a 4-inch by 4-inch square or 5-inch by 5-inch square or whatever. You'll be hitting the target, no problem, all of them will be centered real good, and then you'll go out from 5 yards, 15 feet, to 15 yards, and all of a sudden all of your rounds are above your square. I want it to be in that square, even if it's a little low in the square at close range. I want it to be in the square at 15 yards, and I want it to be in the square at 25 yards. And what I've usually found is then when I go out further to 50 yards or whatever, just between the bullet drop of a 9mm and the height over bore, that's usually it stays on where I want it to be at all the distances I'd pretty much be using these. So that's how I go about sighting things in. So I started at 5 yards and then went out to 15 yards. And I found at 15 yards is where I really discovered an issue with the Smith & Wesson. And that is, this thing I'd shoot one ragged hole. Even out to 25 yards, it was basically one ragged hole. As long as you can hold it steady enough and you can keep that dot where it needs to be, that round is going exactly where that dot is every time. And the trigger makes it easier to make all that happen, as I mentioned previously. Now, I've done that same test with my Glocks and with other guns, and I don't have any trouble still maintaining a really high level of accuracy when I'm rested from a bench like that. Now, shooting freehand, that's where you might struggle more depending on how good of a shooter you are or how good the trigger is. Some of those things really come into play more. But off a bench, even with a bad trigger, usually I can shoot pretty darn well. This Smith & Wesson shoots horrendously at 15 yards. And some of you are not going to believe this, but this is what I found. When I dry fire this gun, as I mentioned in previous videos, if this is my slide and this is my frame, that gun, maybe 50% of the time that I dry fire it, you'll actually see the sights move. Not me jerking the trigger, meaning the slide, I'm holding on to the frame, and the slide is walking. It's going snap, snap, snap like that because there's so much slop in that slide. Now, again, there's slop in almost every striker-fired gun slide. I understand that. The people out there who are arguing with me over this do not understand that when you pull the trigger on other striker-fired guns, when they're sitting at a rest point, you don't see the sights walking like that when you dry fire. You'll dry fire, and there may be some slop in there, but the way that locks up or whatever, when you fire it, the sights still stay where they're supposed to be. And if that's the case, your gun's going to shoot fine. What I found with this gun today is because when that striker falls, 50% of the time it walks and the other 50% of the time it doesn't, there's enough slop in there that I was getting horizontal stringing. I would get, instead of one ragged hole, this thing would walk at 15 yards, 2 to 3 inches. I'd have around here, then I'd have around here, then around here, and then around here, and back and forth along that plane, horizontal, all on the exact same level, because when the striker falls, depending on the way that gun's locked up and the way it's come to rest between the frame and the slide, some of the time that thing's staying true and some of the time it's walking just a little bit. Now, some of you are going to think, no way, the bullet will have left the chamber before any of that happens. That is not true. You do not understand the way this operates if you think that. This is the second the striker falls. This isn't after the round fires or any of that, which means when the striker hits the firing pin or hits the primer, that thing is walking before the round has left the barrel. So you're holding onto a frame and that whole slide is walked just a tiny amount, and so you're shooting an inch this way or 2 inches. Now, if a guy's shooting freehand, most people aren't going to shoot well enough to ever even notice that that's an actual issue. But when you shoot off a bench, you notice. And I don't shoot off a bench most of the time. That's just to sight guns in. But I shot this today, and I thought, man, is this what I think it is? And I kept reloading it, and again, and I experienced the same thing over and over and over again, and I'm telling you, that's what's going on with this gun. But anyway, so that's an issue I experienced accuracy-wise between the two of these. Now, as far as what's included with these guns from the factory, the Canik only comes with 2 magazines, which I wished it came with more magazines. Smith & Wesson comes with 4, which I think is great. Canik comes with 3 different size grips, these 2 here, and then the one that's installed on the gun. Comes with, this is the main iron sights that were installed, but I took those off when I installed this sight plate. And I'll get into some of the optics mounting things you're going to be looking at when it comes to some of that stuff in just a minute. But anyway, so comes with your iron sights, comes with a whole bunch of metal optic mounting plates you can see here, and comes with a cleaning kit, a holster, and this magazine loader assister thing. I don't use those, and a trigger lock. So that's what's included with Canik. Oh, it also includes some steel, or I believe steel, maybe aluminum base pads, metal base pads. And so I swapped those off. One thing that's awesome about the Canik is whether you use the base pads, these metal ones that make the mags fall free, probably a little bit easier because they've got some weight to them, or the stock base pads, the mag well will accommodate both. Smith & Wesson designed a mag well that requires a special base pad. You cannot use a factory magazine because it will not fit their mag well. So, genius engineering as far as I'm concerned with that. That's sarcasm for those of you who didn't catch on to that. This is a lot more better thought out in that regard, in my opinion. So, that's what's included with the Canik. As far as what's included with the Smith & Wesson, you've got a bunch of plastic optic mounting plates versus the metal ones over here. And it comes with an aftermarket, or sorry, not aftermarket, the stock magazine release button. The one that's on here is the extended one. Some people have had problems accidentally bumping that. That hasn't been an issue for me. I actually like this one. But if you want to switch it back to the stock one, they include that. So that's what's included with Smith & Wesson. The Canik also includes this little bit driving thing, couple extra fiber optic rods for your front sight. Inside this little handle, there's a couple different sizes for the magazine release button. I believe it comes with the smallest one installed, which is the perfect size in my opinion. Easy to hit, and yet you're not accidentally going to hit it, so I haven't made a change with any of that stuff. Anyway, so yeah, that's what's included with these 2 firearms. In terms of the value between them, steel frame versus aluminum frame. The steel, like I mentioned, all the benefits, softer shooting, better trigger. This is a better gun, a much better gun, much better thought out gun than what the Smith & Wesson is, in my opinion. But some guys are going to say, yeah, but this comes with 4 magazines. Well, those 2 extra magazines aren't going to compensate for the fact that you're probably going to have to put in a $200 trigger to compete with this gun in the trigger department. But anyway, so I'm going to disassemble these and show you some, from a design perspective, some of the things that I absolutely hate about the Smith & Wesson versus the Canik. Now, because the Canik is a steel frame gun, Gun's clear, as you can see. I'm going to disassemble this thing. What you'll notice is the rails on this Canik are machined into the frame. Okay? They just took the existing steel and machined it down so that you've got your little rails that hold your slide on, and that's machined right into the frame. They could do that because this is steel. It's not aluminum. If you did that with aluminum, the aluminum would probably wear out pretty quickly, and you're not going to be able to do that. So this is not just simply like going from a Palmer Canik to a steel Canik. It's not, oh, well, they just used all the same internals and they used all the same. There are some major differences between this and your normal Canik, and that's a big part of it. On your Palmer Caniks, all of that is going to be just like a Glock or Smith & Wesson, where they just push pins in and put these blocks in that hold all of your rails and all that kind of stuff. That's machined right into the frame on this. So awesome design from that perspective, in my opinion. And as I mentioned, the slide to frame fit on this gun is superb. Where you really will notice it is if you take this gun and you pull the barrel, and I'll show you this, pull this barrel out. Well, you can pull the barrel out, you can pull your recoil spring out, and you just install this like this and slide this on here. And this is superb fit. Very little play, just enough tolerance there to make sure that the gun is reliable, and it just slides just like butter. It's superb. Anyway, so this barrel is fluted, which I guess is a little maybe fancier than what they've done with the Smith & Wesson, but anyway. The finish on this is some sort of chrome finish, if I remember correctly, which is I've listened to people that know more about that than me, because I don't know that much about finishes, and they've said that it's one of the best finishes you can get. In terms of showing wear or anything like that, that they're supposed to last a really long time. So most people probably say the finish on this gun is going to be better than Smith & Wesson. One other thing I'm going to show you on this that I want to pull apart on the Smith & Wesson in just a minute. I think I've got one of these that'll fit this. I think this is the right size. Just bear with me for a minute. I'm going to show you how these grip panels install, and I'm going to show you how the magwell is held in place, because I want you to understand why, all the reasons why this is a better designed gun, better thought out gun. Let's take these little screws out. So you take these 4 little screws out for your grip module. Now the Smith & Wesson's supposed to be toolless, and I'll show you that in a minute. Not so toolless and kind of a pain to pull off, but either which way, it's not like you're changing the grip panels off all the time. But I'm going to show you this. This is what Canik's done, okay? They have machined this steel down to accommodate their grip panels, and then they have this tapped, drilled and tapped here for your screws that hold these different size grip panels on. The front strap is machined right into the steel. So there's no chance of this wiggling loose or anything like that, and these don't budge when they're screwed down or this is in place. In fact, just sliding these on, they don't budge. This is a more solid fit, just sliding that on like that, than what the front strap is on the Smith & Wesson, using whatever attachment method they use, which I think is just pushed in to fit or something. But one of the things I want to show you is you'll notice that because this cage of steel, when you insert a magazine in here, there is no chance of this Palmer from this little grip module touching your magazine. In no way is going to create any friction with your magazine, so that mag is just going to come out buttery smooth every time, right? Because it's steel on steel, it's just nice and smooth. Works great, okay? So, I'm also going to show you the way they attach their magazine well. If you can see this, there's a single screw. This steel frame is drilled and tapped, and that slides in place. Perfect fit, and then that screw holds it in place. Now the way these magwells are designed is the magwell should be beveled inward, and it's fitting the bevel of the frame of the gun. So before you even put the screw in, that magwell has a nice snug fit, and the screw's just to make sure that it, doesn't walk off of there and it stays on real good. Great design. both with the way the straps, grips, modules attach, and the mag well. I'm going to show you the Smith & Wesson. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to disassemble this gun to show you the internals. And for those of you who own an M&P, this should look pretty familiar because, as I mentioned, because this is an aluminum frame, all they're doing is probably taking all the same internal components and stuffing them in an aluminum frame and pushing the pins in them. And so in terms of these slide rails and all this kind of stuff, that's all just pressed and held on to this aluminum frame. It's not a machined integral part of the frame the same way it is on the Canik. So quality-wise, I think it'd be hard to argue with the fact that having the rails and everything machined into the frame is not superior to this method of what most polymer frame guns do. But that's just my opinion. I prefer this. So that's one thing I want to show you. Next thing I'm going to show you is this toolless removal of this magazine well. This is not toolless for me. I cannot spin that thing off of there. I have to use needle nose pliers or jam a flathead screwdriver or something in there to twist this thing. And I always feel like I'm going to break it because this little thing that holds the mag well in and also holds your grip modules in is plastic. Okay, so you got this little pin. You cannot change your grip out on this without removing the mag well. Sorry, not without removing the mag well. The mag well can stay on, but without removing this pin, which is also responsible for holding on the mag well. So you can leave the mag well on, but nothing will be holding the mag well when we pull this pin. This is a plastic piece of junk. And it's only a matter of time if you actually take the mag well on and off more than a handful of times before you're going to snap this thing off. This is just ridiculous. As far as the way the mag well's held on, you can see you've got this flared portion of this frame, and the mag well should have got these grooves that meet that flare so that helps hold the mag well on. So you slide it on like so, right? And then you're just putting that thing in, that pin in, to help hold it in place. But let me show you something. See that? See the way that pulls off of there? That is poor design, poor engineering, poor fitment.